Stuart, you know it is adorable.
What is adorable?
The fact that we wear the same hats and same shirts unplanned. You know what else that is?
What?
Awesome. You know what else is awesome?
What's awesome?
And slightly less adorable is paying for friends. So we would like to pay you $100 to be Stu's friend.
How do you do that?
Oh, you just go to the Facebook page and become friends and invite your friends. And the person that does that the most, we'll pay them $100.
So you're saying if one of our friends that's currently our friend is a member of Filling the Storehouse podcast Facebook group, and they invite all of their friends to be our friends, whoever does that the most is going to get $100 at the end of November?
Yes. The only thing that's different is every time you heard our, inject like Stu. So like my friends go and invite their friends to be your friends because you don't have any friends, but we'll pay people to be your friend. I think it's a great deal.
That sounds awesome, man.
That sounds awesome.
I probably need some more friends in my life.
Definitely need more friends.
So,
and we will pay for friends.
Go to the Filling the Storehouse podcast Facebook page, be our friend, invite all of your other friends to be our friend, and whoever does that the most gets $100. Drawing at the end of November. Go fill your storehouse.
Make it a great day, and we pay for friends. Bye. And hit the button because.
What's up, bros?
What's up, dudes?
Joel. Hello, sir.
Howdy, y'all.
Throw another shrimp on the bobby.
Speaking of throwing shrimp on the bobby, we were talking about some delicious cooking. I tell you what, Joel is a freaking awesome smoker. He throws some meat on a smoker and he smokes some meat real nice like.
Sounds like you're flirting right now.
Flirting with my brother-in-law.
So what do you use? Like what's your smoke of choice?
Well, actually, so I only started caring about this when we came back to the States. We were gone in Asia there for 3 years or 2 years and didn't get to eat any beef over there. That was very good, right? So when we came back, I was like, man, while we're here, we need to eat like as much beef as we can. And so yeah, just happened to have a neighbor at one point who had a smoker, and he kind of started teaching me a little bit and went to hang out with Stu, and he's got a smoke in the backyard. So I've used a couple different kinds, but the one I have is a Rectech. So
a Rectech.
Huh. Rectech, yep.
When Joel and Nicole were staying with us, we literally had big pieces of meat like every night for like 3 weeks straight.
That's awesome.
Like it was like brisket, steak, like other kinds of beef cuts, delicious. Like Joel would like go to the like butcher and pick out like perfect pieces of meat and come back and smoke it all day
Joel,
long.
anytime you want to stay at my house, where we are available for you.
Dude, come on, let's do it.
I would have like meat sweats like nightly.
That's awesome.
Good. That's good, man. Well, hey, this is
chapter 2, dude.
Part 2.
Yeah. 2. There's a lot of exciting. First off, I apologize to everybody. I've had some mic issues for our last 3 or 4 episodes. It sounded garbage, but I think the mic is back. So my apologies. 2, Brovember, been crushing it. Joel was just shaming us with a couple things. One, he was shaming us with how much he swims. He was like, oh yeah, mate, just did 3,000 meters. And we're like, dude, we used to do 500. And he's like, oh yeah. You do sets though, right? And I'm like, no, dude, 500. Like yep. That's the max effort. We did sets to get to 500, not sets of 500. So you're a jerk, Joel. And then we were also talking about bonus points and how Joel was going to just start racking them up with cleanses and photos and prostate exams. And so him and Stu are actually in a competition for who can get the most 5-point days from prostate exams. So it's awesome. I love the competition. I love how men's health is the forefront. and how these two guys are so competitive. They're willing to go the extra mile
Yeah.
just to get a couple points.
Joel's on. Is this day 2 cleanse for you, or is this day 1 cleanse for you?
I did a cleanse on Tuesday, and I'm doing one today as well. Yeah.
Okay, so hey, David, the goal of tonight is to talk about food as much as possible throughout our
cold-hearted,
podcast
dude.
tonight.
It's cold-hearted.
Totally, man. Everything
Messed
sounds
up.
so tasty today.
Dude, I did one yesterday for the first time ever. Like I've tried many
Never
times.
given it a good effort, dude. Like, let's be honest. You went into it knowing you're like, yeah, probably around 3.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, I
Did you
finally
make it through, right? Did you make it through?
I made it through. I made it
Way
through.
to go, man.
Yeah, and it I did not enjoy it. I'm not gonna lie. It was not fun. But I did it, and I felt good this morning, man. It was interesting.
Yeah, dude.
I actually wasn't hungry at all. I was kind of surprised.
I'm telling you, it's crazy. And when you do a 2-day cleanse, it's like, it's so strange how you just like that second day is actually easier than the first day. And you wake up the third day, like, I mean, I was telling you, I had a shake on the, you finish a 2-day, just a shake, you feel so full, and you're like, man, you can just kind of see how much we do overeat and how much we don't need. But man, I'm proud of you, dude. I'm really proud of you. I think that's
Thanks, brother.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks, man. It's good. It's good.
I have full faith in you.
I might do another one. Never. So here we go. Hey, let's get into this. Let's get Joel preaching again. I like it when Joel preaches. It's good stuff.
Too.
So let's hopefully everyone listened to first round, but Joel, just like in a quick couple minutes here, like remind us of what we talked about last time, what we talked about, what God made us for, and then we'll get into round 2.
Yeah, I mean, the big idea was, if a toast is made for toasting, what are you made for? What are we created for? What's the purpose? The purpose for a toaster is really clear because it's in the name. A toaster toasts. Humans, what are they here for? And so what we talked about is there's a purpose in humanity. And the purpose for humanity is to join God in the work that he's doing of making beauty, bringing life, bringing order, making things better. There's a problem. The problem is, instead of doing that, humans decided to make things worse, to bring death instead of life. That's now a part of our DNA, our bias. That's the way we go. Just when, in and of ourselves. But thankfully, Jesus came, became a man. He died, he rose again. He did that not just to save us from our sins, but to save us from our purposelessness, to give us back the purpose that he created for, to join him in what he's doing. So that can take place at a kind of at a very base level, the same purpose for which we were created, to garden, to callous your hands in bringing goodness and beauty, or more specifically, that's kind of, maybe you could call that the general reason that God created us, but there's now a more specific one that exists now that Jesus has come to, which is, as a part of that, more specifically kind of put a sharp point on it, is to let people know about who he is. Those things all go together, but you need the one without the other. You need the one for the other. You can't have the one without the other. Yeah.
So we talked about, how God made us to be workers and to join him in his big mission, to create, right, and to be a part of his work to make things beautiful,
right.
But we're more than just workers, right?
And yes.
So let's get into that. And the first thing you talk about in your second sermon is we really need to look at and answer the question of who are we, like who we really are, and how do we go from being quote unquote dead, to being alive again. So how do we answer that question?
Yeah, it's good. The need of what we're talking about is, if you define yourself as a worker, then all of a sudden your life just becomes, beat down, right? And in so many ways, I feel like this is, if you're a driven person, if you're type A, if you're like a good capitalist, right? You've experienced this with the drive that you have to be successful. What if I'm nothing more than created to work? Then it just crushes you, right? And so I think the reason that I think we need to go back and look, we are workers, it's true, but we there's more to us than that. And so if you go back and look in those exact same areas that we looked at last time, and what I'm talking about is the account of God creating the world. If you go back and look at that, you see that, in fact, God makes people for the purpose of joining with him. He makes people to work, but the first full day people are alive, they don't work because God takes the day off. And so it's left with this feel. You're left with this feel like we're here to join God with what his work in his work. We're kind of like created to do something like a Lamborghini. God's created this amazing piece of machinery, humankind, humans, but then on the very first day, they don't do anything. They just rest with God, and I think the idea is this word for resting, this reason that God created us, or sorry, not this reason God created us. What God did after He created us was it's done, it's finished. So there's this enjoyment that takes place. There's this finished work, and God just stops. And to circle back around, so that's the story in the beginning, but to circle back around and just say, hey, how do we deal with this problem that we have, Stu, that you talked about? It comes back to that as well, because there's this picture of this in the New Testament as well. The Old Testament pictures us being created to do the work with God, but then ceasing because the work's actually all done. God creates us to work, but by the time we show up, all the work's done. In the New Testament, you get this feeling like, yeah, we get to join God in the work that he's doing. Woohoo, let's go. But actually, the most important thing that is done that we get to join in is we don't actually do any of it. God's done all of it. And the big problem that exists between us and God, we could generalize other problems too, but the biggest problem between us and God is only one that he can fix. The great work that we get to join him in, we talked about that last time, is the work in here and the work out there. In both of those places, he does all the work. We just join him. We just get to jump in. And when I was in Asia, I'd bring my daughter with me to the market just because it's fun. I didn't bring her with me because she helped me. She actually made it less efficient. I go to the market, and she'd put her hands on the steering wheel and we just drive around slowly, And the reason I did it was because she helped. She couldn't get me a good deal on mangoes. She couldn't help me with the language. None of that. I just did it because it's fun, man. I love having my daughter along. I want to show her this. This is one of my favorite things. And I think that's the picture of why God created people. That's also why God saves people. It's because he's involving us in making things better.
Yeah, I love that picture, and I also love how you said that you highlighted that the reason God does all this, and he involves us, and he did everything and involves us in it, and you highlighted it. It's because who he is. It's because he did it because who he is and what he derives joy from. And I love that picture that he didn't have to. He did it because who he is, because he's a God of love, of creation, of beauty. And we get to enjoy that. And since you were telling a story, I kind of gave a teaser for this last time, but I loved the story that you told about the men's hike. Yeah. And if you wouldn't mind sharing that, I think it's such a great story.
Yeah, well, I think when we talk about the work that exists in the world, and how can I put this in the right context? So Ephesians 2:8-9 says that by grace you've been saved through faith, and not a result of your works that anyone should boast. It's just God's work that has gone into doing that. So we can't boast at all for the primary work that he's done in the in here work. God's also involved in the out there work. So that's the connection. So trying to find a way that I can illustrate how we join God, I guess, in the work of salvation here, being saved from our sins, but also being a part of the salvation that's taking place out there. So in here and the out there work. You know, it says that it's by grace that you've been saved. That's something we don't deserve, but something that God did. And so the picture is kind of like I was involved in a training program, and I'm a paraplegic. I can't walk, and so there's this men's hike as a part of this training program. And so the leaders come to me and they go, "Hey, we want to involve you in this. How about this? We've got an idea. What we're going to do is the men are going to hike for 3 days. We want you to meet them on day 2 at this specific location where you can drive your car and just park real close and then just walk a little ways. And then you're going to show up on the side of the road. All the guys are going to come, and then we're going to give them a note. And the note is going to say, hey, now you have to get Joel to like base camp, which is like 5 years, different unit of measurement, 5 miles away. And so that's the way you're going to get involved, Joel, is they're going to carry you. And I was like, this is the dumbest idea ever. I mean, the only thing I get to bring to this is being useless. So, but
so you're like Stu in a way, right? I mean, effectively. Sorry.
Well, I remember you telling me about this before. I remember you and Nicole telling me about this before you guys were going to do it, and I remember you not like being super stoked on it.
No, I was. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it was a huge blow to my pride, you know, like I've got nothing to bring to this. And so I got over myself because I was thinking, okay, look, I got to just get over it and do it. I got to deal with the fact that sometimes I'm just weight. Like, it's true. We're all there. Yeah, just have to deal with it, right? So I thought, okay, I'll have to deal with this. So I went along, and actually once I got over myself, it was fun because I'm with really cool guys. And so that, sure enough, they make like a couple of them go into the woods and cut down these 2 huge branches. One of them's got a hammock in his backpack, and so they hang this hammock between these 2. So you got 4 guys carrying me, like basically, like, you know, through the woods, right? And I basically did nothing the whole way there. We get to the camp, and the point is, you don't go, aren't we great, guys? We did a good job, because I literally did nothing. The only thing that I was dead weight, and that's what I brought to the whole thing, is because the reason they wanted me a part of it was because I brought absolutely nothing. And that's, in a sense, when it comes to the inward salvation, dealing with our sin. But there's a sense in which this is true of the broader things too, is that we don't do really anything of significance, nothing at all. We just rest in the fact that God has done it for us. And it's so hard. I was going to say, as Americans or as Westerners, we want to earn, you know, we want to be the ones that made it happen. I actually don't think that's just Western. I think that's human nature. We want to find a way that we can be like, I got the badge, you know, but there is no badge for entering this relationship with God. He literally did it all. And the biggest problem that we have as people who've put our faith in Jesus, if you've come along that journey, the biggest problem we have all the time, self-righteousness, comes from believing that there was something in my effort. Yeah, you know, it's something when you get to camp, you're like, we did it. No, bro. No, we did not. You had nothing to do with it. And that's kind of, I think that's the relationship we have with God. Things are always better when we realize, no, he did this. He did this, and I'm along for the ride.
Yeah, man, that's hard to swallow, right? As humans, as Westerners, as Americans, as Australians, as Canadians, like we you know, we talk about this idea, the first idea in part 1 of, hey, we were made to work, and like, dude, I'm on board. I love to work. Yeah. I feel like, you know, I feel excitement. I get a rush. I love to work, you know, and when you tell me that God made me work, I'm all in, right? But then I love how you said that all I brought to the table was nothing. And that's kind of true. Like we're all the same way. Like, yeah, you're a paraplegic and you brought nothing to that situation, but God did everything for us already. Right. And in the overall picture, we truly don't bring anything to the table.
Well, and you might say, like, I struggled with this for a long time because I'm like, man, what do you mean I don't bring anything to the table, dude? Like, let's talk about how I can play guitar. I brought a lot to the table. Like, I spent hours practicing. I put my mind to it. But when you start to think about it beforehand, well, okay, where'd you get that mind from though, Joel? Who gave you that mind, right? Where'd you get the time for it? I mean, most people in history have never had, 10 hours a week to put into playing guitar. And just between you and me during college, it was a little more than that. But, like it was definitely misspent youth. But, so you can say, yeah, hey, like, no, it was me. I have this job. I worked hard for this job. And there's some sense in a very small micro way that you did something about it. But the whole table was set before you showed up. Like the knife and the fork were there, dude. The food was in your plate. God did all of that. There's the gratitude, the self-made man is just arrogance, I think. And so for me, in marriage, in life, all of this is trying to work out how to make sure we don't get to that place where I'm like, no, I did it. I think any sort of real way, it's we realize we were made and then we get to join the party. And we were saved, and it's only through faith, through resting in what God did for us. Practically speaking, we have to work that through and realize that how much we're resting in what God's already done for us.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was kind of thinking through the story as you're telling it, and thinking through some of these, trying to put myself in that situation, and then you said something. The word that kept popping in my head is humility, right? You mentioned the humility, get over yourself, and then you mentioned the arrogance and the falseness of the arrogance. And I would offer, you can't speak to it, but I think that the entire process, that exercise, enriched the experience for those dudes in a way that you'll never know. And they may have expressed it to you, when you guys got to the campsite. I'm sure there was rich conversation there, but I'm thinking from their perspective, like the idea of using their blessing and to figure out ways to serve and in different ways, that there are lessons in that I'm sure they gained, that without your presence there and without that whole dynamic, they would have never experienced. And I think there's so much lesson, and through your humility, there's potential that it was a life-changing experience for them, that because they will tell, I guarantee you, they tell the story and they tell it, but it's from a different perspective and what they gained from that. I'd be super interested. I don't know if you have any insight to what they gained from that, but I would be super interested to hear like that side of it too, because that's significant, right? Like that's a really cool, unique experience all around. And your lessons were different because it came from a place of humility, and you probably gained tremendously from that. But I'd be curious if they shared what they gained.
Well, but I can't bring that to mind right now. It's a few years ago, but I can, and I think we can use the illustration to apply something different, right? So in the illustration, as I've used that, it's God's work for us, and then what we bring to the table, right? But like if we were just to talk about what it could illustrate for those guys, if we want to imagine that we're the guys that are leading it or carrying me, what you get out of it is, okay, there's really this illustration only goes so far, but the idea would be that they're giving completely from someone who isn't giving anything back. And I think that that's really what we struggle with so much. When I think about my marriage, I tend to, in my weakest moments, give to it knowing I'll get something back. And when we fall into parenting stuff too, we give to it, knowing we'll get back. And it's easy to enter into those relationships in our life, to give as long as we're going to give back, get something back, even doing good service, good works and helping people. We can often fall into the trap of just doing it because it feels good. But in the end, what Christ has empowered us to do is to give when there is no give back. You know what I mean? There is, like, as a result of that. And I think I see that there was some of that in those guys. Actually, man, I could tell you stories, but it was crazy interesting to see the reactions of guys. There's a whole bunch of there's a whole spectrum of reactions that took place. There was the guys who complained about it all the way. There was the guys who didn't like the hammock and the seat that they made and were complaining about it for the first mile, about how we need to stop and redesign it. And then there's the guys who weren't that strong, but just shut up and just did their best to carry me, and just weren't looking for more honor or anything like that. They were just in it to serve. So I do think that those guys were the picture of sort of like what it looks like to receive from Christ everything that we have, and then we pass that on without any kickback. And that's super counterintuitive, everything against human nature. And every problem in my marriage, I would say, has had to do with the fact that I haven't been able to do that. I haven't just been able to pass that forgiveness on. I haven't been able to pass on that love, that unreciprocated, just self-sacrificial love that Christ gave me.
Dude, I love that, man. That's an awesome answer.
Yeah, don't feel alone there, dude, because I think both of us will probably be in the same boat as you with being a husband and being a father. I mean, we were talking about being a father right before we started recording, and we were saying that we thought we were going to bring children in to be to bring God into their lives, but it might be the opposite of God coming more into our lives to learn lessons from our kids.
Totally
yeah.
right.
I actually can't relate. If you talk to my wife, she just always talks about how giving and patient, loving, kind, basically all the fruits of the spirit: love, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control, and
patience. Patience is what comes to mind first when I think of David Gutierrez.
Thank you, Stuart.
Patience.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's very sweet of you. No, it so relates to that conversation we had about the kids, man. Like the kids, what I was cracking up about when you said it, because it is 1000% true. Like, they bring out the absolute worst human being that I could possibly imagine myself. Like the worst version of myself that I didn't even know was still in there, because they bring out the best, the loving and the caring and the nurturing. And then you're like, why did you do that one thing that I know is going to piss me off? And now I'm through the roof. Right.
Yeah.
And it's so, as a Christian man, it's such a hard thing, because I beat myself up for that. When it's done, I'm like, wow, you are a terrible human being.
Yeah. And bro, once you get there, that's actually a really good sign. Because that's actually the truth. That's what's revealed to us, actually, is because the whole point isn't that we did anything to deserve it anyway. So when you get to that place, when you're just like, oh my goodness, I'm worse than I ever thought, that's actually when you're in the place to fully receive grace properly. When there's no like, oh, I was just angry, oh, I just hadn't eaten, no, actually the problem is just I naturally sin. This is who I am. This isn't like so many of the apologies I see these days are like, well, the people who really know me know I'm not like that. I'm not a bigot. The people who really know me, they know that was out of my character. I was just, I'd had too much to drink, or I hadn't eaten enough, or no, actually the way it goes is, for real, the people who know me the best, no, I actually am that horrible. That's really who I am. And my only hope isn't that you're going to like me. My hope is that a savior died for me and that I am forgiven because of that. So there's this crazy thing that happens in Christianity, which is, no, I really am that bad. but I still have self-esteem, not because you brought this up before, David, not because of who I am, but because who Jesus is, because who God is. My worth is found not in anything that I'm capable of, but everything that he did for me. And working that through practically is probably what I'm doing in life. And it's probably what we're trying to do. Like, work out, how can I be this horrible of a person and still look at myself in the mirror in the morning? It has everything to do with who Jesus is, man. That's who it has to be.
I love that. Speaking of things that are not natural for us to do is this idea of rest and resting in him, of the seventh day, we were all ready to get to work, but God had already done it all, right? And we show up ready to go. We're the subcontractors on the job site, ready to start framing some walls, and he's like, I'm already done, dude.
Yeah.
So what do we do? Like, and how do we handle that? How do I identify with that?
That's good. I mean, I think the answer is rest, but it's rest for a purpose, right? And the reason that you tell these stories that we just told before you get into the principle of rest is to understand why it is we rest. Like, the reason you tell the story of God creating everything and then creating us and then Jesus saving us and then involving us is because if you come at rest the wrong way, you rest for the wrong reasons. If you rest for the wrong reasons, all you're doing is getting ready to work again. And if you rest for the wrong reasons, you're just feeding into your own myopic view of yourself, which is that you're needed by God. And actually, really, the way we do it is, or the kind of the biblical, I think, idea of rest is much more, we get to work with God so that we can enjoy it, just enjoy it. And whereas when it gets twisted a little bit, you end up resting so you can be productive again next week. And because the world depends on me, or because I need this. Whereas if you realize that God's provided for us what we need, then you go, man, I should just kick back and remind myself of that once a week. Now, it's not that you should never work. That's laziness. That's not what we were created for either. But it's keeping in perspective why we work and why we rest. And we work because we get to join God in what he's doing. We work because we're joining him in this bigger thing. So what you do is you rest. I think the biblical idea is 1 day a week. That amount. In the Old Testament, it's a part of the law. It's a part of the covenant. It's who Israel was. They were supposed to take the seventh day off. In the New Testament, after Jesus, it's never mandated during our time. And you're going to have Christians disagreeing on it, exactly how important this is. This is my view. I embrace people who have a slightly different view, but I would just say the first day of the week, which is what we call Sunday, isn't the same as Sabbath. The idea is we don't have to anymore. In a way, I don't think they had to either, but we don't do it because it's mandated. We don't do it because it gets us closer to God. We do it because we look at these principles and we go, dang, so much has been done for me. So much has been given to me. Creation, like, just go out there and check it out. God made this for us to rule with him, to organize with him, to bring life with him. God did this for us. And then we get to do that the same with the other work we're doing. We need to kick back and be like, wow. And there's a sense in which I joined God in this. And so there's a sense in which this house that I've built, this deck that I've built, this business that I've built, there's a sense in which my effort was involved. But if it hadn't been for God's work before me, I couldn't have done that. So on this one day, I'm just going to kick back and go, wow, I can't believe I got to be a part of this ride. This is amazing. And I'm just going to enjoy it. My whole life isn't going to be work. I'm going to enjoy the work that I was made for as well.
Yeah. And it's I think it's an interesting thing too, because depending on where you fall on your view of the Sabbath mandating or not, or I think everything that God puts in the Bible is it behoove us to take notice and to see the benefits and the gifts of what he tells us to do. And I think the idea of rest is so difficult, and everybody again has a different opinion of this, but it's such a hard thing. And it's funny because there's a couple observations that I've made with children again, and two that are just, and I can only figure it out that it's God creating us for relationship and proximity and fellowship, and God creating us to be out, in his creation. And one is our in Maryland on the East Coast in the summer is horrible. It's disgusting. It's hot. You probably experienced, I imagine Vietnam is very similar, very hot, humid. Well, our AC went out, and it was like the hottest summer that has been ever since we lived here for like 6 years. No AC in the house, and COVID. So there's no promise of an AC for months. So I set up one single window unit in my son's room, and all my children slept in that room together. And I'll tell you, Joel, it was the weirdest thing, but they slept more on the floor together than they've ever slept independently. Right. Like I'd have to wake them up at like 9 o'clock. Normally one's up at 7, and then they all just kind of get up at the latest, but they slept till like 9 o'clock and just nonstop. And I think what happens is they wake up and they look at each other and they're like, oh, there's no FOMO. And they just fall back asleep and they're out. Right. And then the other observation was when I was home recently, we went for a hike. We went outside. When they're on a device and you take them off a device, every time, 100% of the time, 100% of the time, terrible behavior, disrespectful, crying, whatever. We went for a 4.5-mile hike, not a single complaint. We're playing soldiers and sailors and war, running around the mountains. Like I'm posting them up. They're checking the ridgeline for enemies and bad guys the entire walk. And it was just an interesting observation. I'm trying to wrap my head around it as a father, but I'm curious because those were kind of restful situations where we did them differently than what the world's definition of rest is. And it was beautiful, dude. It was amazing. In both circumstances, it was just, I felt energized.
Yeah.
And it was, again, I'm trying to wrap my head around this idea of rest because I do think there's a blessing in it. And what it means. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, like how do you practically, it's easy to say it, like what do you practically do to get after this idea and to rejuvenate and rest in God and get true rest?
Yeah, it's good. Well, first, let me tell you, this journey that I'm on now to understanding rest isn't something where it started. I would say one of the first places that I realized something was wrong was Nicole and I were living in Dallas. We'd had this crazy schedule for like a month. I don't think we had a day off for a month, right? And it's in college football season, and I've got sucked into the American football college thing. And we've worked for like a month, and finally we have Saturday and Sunday off. And I'm just like, sweet. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm setting up and on the couch. I'm watching football like 8 hours that day, right? And I just remember the next day, because this is rest. This is my day of rest, right? And I just remember the next day feeling like terrible, like so bad, like just not energized at all, right? And I just was like, now I've got to recover. I guess it's just because of 4 weeks of being so busy. I didn't put it down to the fact that maybe watching football wasn't rest. And so the next day I'm just done. And Nicole and I are like, well, we should go to church, I guess. And so we go to church, and I'm like, I don't know. What's that? I don't know what that is. And then we come home, and I'm like laying down, and Nicole's like, hey, let's go to the park with McKinney. We just had one kid at the time. And I remember we went to the park and we played outside, and I was like, what is going on? Like I had no desire to do that. I had zero. I just did it because I felt obligated. And at the end of it, I was like, I somehow, this thing that I thought was rest yesterday wasn't. And somehow these things that I did today, which I didn't think were rest, actually were. And so I think we have to rethink how we define this, because usually what we think of when we think of rest is me time. Usually what we think of when we think of rest is relaxation. Usually what we think of when we think of rest is recuperation. But I actually think that there's something much more active involved. And I'll just be honest, I don't feel like I've got this nailed down yet. But when we came back from Asia a year and a half ago, Nicole and I just decided, man, I think we need to explore this thing a little bit. So what we did, and what we're trying to do, we've been out of the rhythm for the last couple of months, but every week we would pick a day. It wasn't always Sunday. It wasn't always Saturday. Some days it was Friday. It depended on the week. And we decided we're going to rest on that day. And that's going to be specifically stopping our work, ceasing our labor, and enjoying the work of our hands. But for some other purposes, understanding that God has got us here and that he's the one that's done it. So couple of the first things we noticed in the first couple of weeks, number one, we decided, okay, wait, I need to give you more background. So we decided to do this rest. I'm on my computer all day. That's my work. I'm a teacher. So I'm learning Vietnamese. And so that's my job. I'm doing these things. And so I'm like, okay, we're going to close the computer. Hey, I don't want to be distracted by phone. We're going to shut the phone off. And we're going to try and do that. Okay. Well, first of all, by 1 o'clock, the first afternoon, bored out of our trees, didn't know what to do, didn't know how to do it, realized this wasn't fun because we didn't know what to do. So I would just say rest isn't always fun. It's because it's a skill. It's straight up a skill. It's like learning to play guitar. It's like learning to speak another language. It's like learning to sing. It's whatever. It's the skill. It's math. You got to work out how you do it. And so that was the first thing that we noticed. Second thing that we noticed really quickly, I wouldn't have noticed this. Thankfully, I have a great wife, but it takes preparation. So Nicole just can't stand it if the house is disgusting. And so what would happen is we'd wake up on our rest day and ready to rest, and it's just like a pigsty. And she's like, I can't do this. I can't rest when it's like this. And come to find out, as we got into it more, ancient Hebrews always spent 3 or 4 hours the day before Sabbath, preparing the day. And they would say that was as important. You would work so you could rest. You know what I mean? You would do those 3 or 4 hours of prep. And so we've learned to have a good rest day now. You have to get ready. You have to get ready for it. You have to actually clean the house the day before. You have to think about your meals. So you're not spending 3 hours making food that day or whatever. So those are just some of the things that we've worked out.
One of the things that you said in your sermon that I really heard was, this idea of rest is ceasing, and to cease as a workee, as you had said it, is hey, just stop and look around and enjoy the masterpiece. Enjoy what God did for us. And some of the actionable items that you talked about kind of already was, hey, putting devices away, putting phones away, putting computers away, putting TVs away. Another thing that you said that I kind of heard was doing it with groups, doing it, being in fellowship, being with community. And it's not necessarily relaxing, but you said it was remembering and enjoying and ceasing God's work, and being in this creation. And so one of the things that we've tried to start doing as a family a lot more, and I think, as you say these things, I think it's kind of a perfect, idea of what I see as rest. And David spoke to it already too, is we were doing Sunday hike days, where we would go as a family. So there's that group aspect. We're not on devices. We're out in God's creation, and we're enjoying the work that he created, this beautiful mountainside, these peaks and valleys and trees and rivers and lakes, and like we'd go for hours. And for a while we were doing it every Sunday, and it did feel like it felt energizing. And we'd get back, and like the kids, man, like they love it. They love just, they would kind of complain about it at first, and but once you get out on the trail, just in nature and being in creation, like it's awesome. And my wife and I feel closer. The kids enjoy it, and so as you talk about this like idea of rest, it's not necessarily just sitting on a couch and doing nothing, being bored. I think it's like what you're talking about, like just enjoying creation and kind of just taking a step back and being like, wow, God, this is amazing. And so that's kind of how I when I was listening to you and thinking about this, that's kind of one of the things that I think was pretty practical.
Yeah, I'll add to that because another practical thought, just popcorning ideas. What you're just saying there is a great one. A friend of mine, when I started dipping into this and trying to work out how to do it, said that he thought, like, if you work with your mind, rest is to work with your hands. But if you work with your hands, to rest is to work with your mind. So, for me, I'm a bit of I'm not a great handyman, but on that rest day, like if there's something to fix around the house, if I can do it, I find it's incredibly fulfilling to do it. I imagine if you like work with your hands all week, if you're like a plumber or a roofer or something like that, I imagine that feels less restful. Then, but by the same token, if you do that all week, I think sitting down reading a book or something like that, journaling or writing something or painting something, those things, any sort of creative work anyways, I think is a good step forward as a rest. But I do think it's important to kind of remember what the underlying purpose isn't the whole time you're doing it, you have to be thinking about God. It's not like you have to be chanting something, but it's kind of like at Thanksgiving, what are you doing? You're remembering what an amazing country we have, and you're remembering the pilgrims and what they did and how they were provided for by those first Indians and the connections that they made. So they made it through the summer, through the winter, right? So that's kind of, you don't have to be doing that the whole time, every time you spoon in like another fork of turkey and your pumpkin pie. It's not like you have to, but that's the idea. The idea is this is a celebration. So this is a weekly celebration. I would even suggest like a daily celebration of God inviting us in for some silence in the morning or something like that, a remembrance, and making that focus. And then a time once a year as well, which you have to rethink because that's not usually how we do vacations. But that could be one way you do it, is make your vacation built around being thankful for what God's done.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've been trying to be more conscious of, years ago, I read, I don't remember the author. I'm sure you may, Practicing His Presence, that little, spiritual book. And it talked about the goal is to be constantly, in prayer. And he highlights, like, that doesn't mean you're like constantly all day long, you're, not doing anything but praying. Like, it's just in every interaction that you have, and I realize, as Stu mentioned, I'm a very, very patient individual with zero anger issues. But it's really hard. Like, if you're interacting with somebody, maybe it's a frustrating interaction. It's very hard to be mad at someone when you're actively praying for them. Like, in that moment where we're having a conversation, it's frustrating. You're like, you know what, I'm going to take some time just to pray as we're having this frustrating conversation, and it changes the whole dynamic. And I think, I don't know what just made me think of that as you're talking through like prayer and remembrance. I think the intentionality of everything you just highlighted, I think, is really what is sticking with me, right? The intentionality of forcing myself in a frustrating conversation to pray for somebody. The intentionality of being like, hey, we're going to clean the house beforehand so we can enjoy it tomorrow. We're going to prep our meals, which you get a point for in November for having your meals planned out.
Boom.
And we're going to be very intentional with these things so that we can actively enjoy this rest, and we don't have to resort to screens. We're going to be out doing the Sunday hikes, and I think that's why like traditions of Sunday dinners are even fun. You're remembering your, like my desire when we get back to Colorado is that we have Sunday dinners, and I would love if like my mom and my dad and Stu and like people that I care about, the family that I have and the family that I choose, my friends, you take those times to embrace and be very intentional about it. And I think that intentionality really resonates with me. And I love the practical, just the practical tips that both of you provided. I think that's, you can make a list. Why not be intentional? I was thinking about before I go back to Colorado, making a couple lists, and they're date lists, the dates I want to do with my wife, the dates I want to do with my kids, the dates, set all that stuff up, activities that we want to do. And then you have your nerdy spreadsheets. Maybe Stu will build it for me. And you just pick that day. We're like, okay, we're going to go to this restaurant. I have it on the list. We're going to do it. We're going to try it. And it's great. And you can look like a hero, right? You don't have to tell everybody you made it. You could just be like the idea guy. But because you spent a couple hours beforehand, months earlier, thinking about it, now you're like, oh yeah, let's go do this thing. I looked it up. I think there's a lot of goodness in the intentionality of rest.
That's good, man.
Speaking of spreadsheets, we were called out earlier today by one of our colleagues, Stephen Hebtig, about spreadsheets and how I was printing out spreadsheets and marking them with checks, and how he called us dinosaurs because you can do that all online now and make it very easy with
but he went nerd, man. He's like, well, I linked the spreadsheet to the Google thing, to the app, to the thing, and I just edit in one place and it automatically populates 17 things. I'm like, whatever, dude.
Joel, this is big. This is good, man. This is good. I love talking about this stuff with you. And I would like to end with kind of a challenge to our listeners, and you kind of put that challenge to your audience at church was, hey, ask yourself, how you're going to put rest in your life. How does ceasing look to you? And just like David said, like, how do you be intentional with it? And we've talked a lot about, what's important to you goes on the calendar. Look at your calendar in your checkbook and you can see what's important to you. Make rest important to you. So, I would like to challenge our listeners to kind of think about this and actually schedule it. Make Sunday a rest day, and talk about it with your spouse and your kids, and put the phones away, put the computer away, prepare for it, plan out a hike, plan out a carpentry project. That's something like you're talking about, Joel, and I know David loves to do too. Like, just go out and build something, build like a crappy looking table, right? And like, just have fun. Like,
doesn't sound like he's got a lot of faith in your ability there, David.
Yeah, I mean, he builds stuff, but it's not very good.
Whatever, my stuff is awesome. We both go to the same site, dude. Anna White, that's my girl. She put some good plans together, man.
You get some good plans from Anna White.
Awesome.
Yeah, but yeah, that stuff is awesome. So what I would like to kind of leave today with is hey, look at this stuff and think about it, and schedule it out, and think about what rest looks like to you and your family, and try it. I mean, it motivates me to really try it more. Like, since I listened to that the other weekend, and we'll put a link to Joel's sermon in the show notes, but I've been really trying to be a lot more intentional about not doing our real estate business on Sundays, and not replying to emails, and taking more time to read books and just hang out and listening to sermons online, and going on Sunday hikes and doing carpentry projects, and just enjoying and remembering it. And it's good. I enjoy it. And I think it's important to get ready for work again. And it's not to get ready for work, but it's to remember the work that God did.
Yeah, and I think there's also an element of, as you do these things, it can be a lot of fun, and your family is also observing what right looks like, right? I'm thinking, this image that keeps popping in my head is I love, like you, Joel. I enjoy, I love doing like yard work. Like I like going out mowing the lawn. But what's fun is I keep having this vision of Jake, my middle son, my oldest son, but my middle child. He would come out and he wanted to push the lawnmower, and I never showed them how to use the automatic thing because that's weak, right? You gotta push this thing. And so, but he came out one day in like full Spider-Man costume. I don't know why. He came out in a costume. He's like, I want to mow the lawn. I'm like, cool, man. And Erica was standing up on the balcony looking down. And so he gets behind the lawnmower. He's up here and he's pushing it and he's working and he's loving it. And dude, the lines are like, initially, I'm like the OCD. I'm like, oh, dude, you're like way. But then I just took a moment to step back and be like, this is awesome. And it's fun. Like the dude is like making swirly lines through the yard, not doing a single straight line. But it was an enjoyable moment. We all laughed. It was rest. They were seeing what he was working, but he was also, it was the family dynamic. It was doing things together. It was empowering him. It's not correcting him. I could have very easily been like, dude, you got to get the straight lines. But he was like 8 years old. So just the fact that we were out there doing it and the fulfillment that he got and how proud he was, like all these things, I think there's a lot of, it's not just like you said, resting. And I would argue that it's that the rest part of it, sitting on the couch, is we're getting it wrong with that.
Yeah, man, I think you're right. I think with the spirit of this stuff, it comes down trying to put that in there again. Why we're doing it. Essentially, the reason we're doing, if we do this right, we place ourselves in history in the correct place every time. If you work for the right reason, it can be, I'm placing myself in history again. This work that I do every day is a remembrance of who I am and who God is, what he did, what he's doing, what he will do. Rest is supposed to be the same thing. Rest is a time, there's the form, which is we cease, but the function is to remember where we've come from, what we're doing, where we're going. And I think the form has some strengths to it, and I think it's awesome when we get to do them. But it's best practiced when the form leads to the function, when the medium reminds us of the message, and kind of pushes us that direction. And when you think about, your family there, dude, and getting them together and that sort of thing, that's what I think of. I think, yeah, you've got this beautiful thing, and then to infuse it with that meaning of why we're doing this, I think that's the beauty and the skill. And especially as the parents or the people who are trying to initiate that takes some skill, takes some time. And for us, it's taken a lot of conversations. Nicole and I, like, how are we doing on that? Why was that like we whiffed, this last rest time? What happened there? What can we do better next time? So it's going to take some time thinking about it.
You know what I would like to see happen on a rest day? I would like to see David get into his Spider-Man costume and mow the lawn.
I just have to send you pictures of what happened last weekend. No big deal.
Oh, you did that last weekend?
Every weekend. Grass doesn't need to be cut, but I put on the Spider-Man and I get to it.
There's a joke in there somewhere, but I'm gonna hold off.
Joel, you're awesome, dude. I encourage people to go listen to the sermons. There's a ton of rich content in there, and not nearly enough time that we could cover everything here, dig into it. But dude, you're awesome. I think you're probably are you our first two-time guest?
Three-time guest, dude.
Well, technically three-time guest.
Yeah, three-time
just
guest.
appreciate you taking the time, dude, and sharing some of the word with us. And Dude, you're an inspiration. I love talking to you. I know that you would prefer that I was your brother-in-law, but it just didn't work out that way. So, you know, but we can still chit chat.
That's right, man. We'll still put a brisket on the smoker here one of these days. Appreciate
can't
you
wait.
guys. Appreciate you guys a lot too. I mean, we're talking, I think I love this because in some ways I've given my life to kind of working out the theoretical concepts here. And I feel like you guys are applying yourselves more to the practical stuff. And I think we're all part of the body and we make a good team as we do it that way. Appreciate how you guys are out there putting these principles into practice.
Yeah, man, good stuff. Well, guys and gals, hope you got something out of this. And hey, think about it. You know, bring out your calendar, sit down with your spouse, think about how you're going to put this into action, and put some rest in there into your weekly schedule. I think it's important. So, if you like this episode, please share it. Hey, take a screenshot, post it up on your socials, invite someone to come and listen to this podcast. Go check out Joel's sermons online. We'll post the YouTube in the show notes. And yeah, I think most importantly, let's go fill your storehouse.
Yeah, and sometimes dress up a little bit. Maybe wear a costume to cut the grass, or do some other things. I don't know. Just throwing that out there.
I got a pretty sweet King Triton outfit from this year's Halloween. I might go mow the lawn in King Triton outfit.
Yeah, nobody knew with the wig what you were. We didn't get even close to a guess on that in the linked events.
Yeah.
But yeah, awesome. Well, hey, thanks, friends. Thanks for listening. Joel, thank you. Love you guys. You're awesome. Make it a great day, friends.
See ya.
See ya.